never want to delay too much to bring this gentleman on. That's the ESPN national correspondent, the author of How Football Explains America, and, of course, the host of the ESPN's NFL Matchup Show, and that would be Sal Paolantonio. Hello, Sal.
Good evening, Pat Callahan, and everybody watching This Week in Pro Football on JAKIB Media. Great to join you once again, going into Week 5, Pat. Going into Week 5.
I know, a month already in the book, Sal, and there's a million things to talk about, but just if you'll let me cast a look back to last week, you have been stating all season and going back to last season about how long it's taking Jaylen Herz to get rid of the ball. And we saw it again last week, Sal, whereas Baker Mayfield, he was barely getting the ball from the center and it was leaving his hands. Just talk about for a minute, why such a difference between the two quarterbacks last week in Tampa Bay?
Well, the contrast was overwhelming last week for a number of reasons. First of all, the Eagles' defense was playing off the ball, and so Baker Mayfield could stick his right foot in the ground and hit his first read, and he was throwing the ball, getting rid of it, time to throw in under 2 seconds, Pat, under 2 seconds, which is unheard of in the National Football League. That's Tom Brady-like.
Right.
And so there was a great contrast with Jaylen Herz. He came into the game holding the ball, time to throw, 3.2 seconds, which is an eternity in the National Football League. It was the slowest time in the NFL and the slowest time of his career. Now he's at 3.1 seconds, time to throw, snap to release, which is the slowest in his career and second slowest in the National Football League. And in my opinion, it's a cause and effect relationship with the negative plays from the quarterback position. Over the last 2 years, negative plays are defined by sacks, fumbles, interceptions. Since the start of last season, the guy with the most sacks, fumbles, and interceptions is Bryce Young. He was benched. He was a rookie. He was benched.
Right.
No longer in the starting lineup.
Right.
Number 2, Sam Howell. I'm not sure where Sam Howell is. That's and I'm not trying to say that pejoratively.
I know
about
what
the
you
young
mean.
man, but I mean, I don't know where he is. I honestly don't. I know he's been popping around. He was with Washington for a while, so he's number 2. Number 3 on that list is Jaylen Herz. Number 3 on the list of negative plays.
Yeah.
So it's inexcusable. The head coach said as much. It is definitely not sustainable. How do you fix it? Well, it's read and reaction time has got to be sped up. And he was doing that in training camp. Now, in training camp, they're not coming to take your head off. There's a different situation.
Right.
You don't have a pass rush to deal with.
Right.
Really not comparable. So they've got to do something in practice to speed up his read and recognition, whether it's after 2 seconds, they stop the play. Stop it.
Right.
Okay? Stop. That play is over. We will do it again until you get the ball out in 2 seconds or less.
All right.
Or 2.5 seconds. That's something that they have to work on. If the play goes over 2.5 seconds, you stop the play. It's a negative play. We're doing it again.
All right.
That's one way you can do it. I've seen that done at the NFL level and collegiate level, Pat.
All right. When we get back from this quick break here, I'm going to ask Sal about to what extent the Eagles not having their top 2 receivers was a factor last week and what the status is of the 2 guys heading into the bye. We're also going to talk with Sal about Nick Sirianni. I just got some questions about his press conference. And then we're going to talk about the resurgence of the run game and the backsliding of the pass game in the National Football League. That's all next on a Week 5 edition of This Week in Pro Football. All right, back here this week in Pro Football with the great Sal Paolantonio, the author of How Football Explains America. I strongly urge you to go pick that book up. It's been reissued, right, Sal? It's out again, and it's a great read. Great little read. Also, the host of the NFL Matchup Show, which I know you'll be cranking out again this weekend. Look forward to that. Anything particular on that agenda, Sal?
Oh, we're going to take a deep dive into the Kansas City Chiefs on Monday night. You'll see.
All right. I mean, that is a fact. It is a great story. I mean, that is a team. Just Reid and Mahomes. They just don't lose games. At not 1 second in that game last Sunday did I think the Chiefs were going to lose to the Chargers. I don't care if it was 10-0. That didn't matter at all. That there is something incredibly unique about the Chiefs right now, Sal. So I look forward to that. All right, one last look back at that game, Sal. 33-16. You give up 33 points, but I'm still talking offense here. Your tight end is your leading receiver, 7 for 62. That's not going to work when you give up 33 points. Jahan Dotson, as you pointed out, the Eagles made the trade for him, and he has been utterly, completely ineffectual. Will the Eagles' passing game pick up noticeably once A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith return?
Yeah, and the question is, when will they return? So a hamstring can be very problematic, and so can a concussion.
Right.
But, there was really no excuse last week at the beginning of the game. You're down by 7. You can't get anything cranked on offense. Then you're down by 14. It's super hot, 108 degrees, real feel in the stadium, Raymond James Stadium. Your defense is already beginning to feel the heat. You got to give them time on the bench. I don't care if they're loading up the box or not.
Right.
You got to run the ball, and they didn't do that. They didn't give Saquon Barkley enough chances with the football. And that's what they have to do in the meantime until they get this passing game done. Figured out.
Right. So, I mean, I think you're absolutely, they've got to, well, we're going to talk in a few minutes about how the run game is resurgent. Barkley's been terrific, and the Eagles are going to have to rely on that. I think you're certainly right until the passing game gets figured out. Let's look at the other side of the ball, Sal. The Eagles in this span that you and I have been talking about, in which they're now 3-8, have given up 278 points, the most in the NFL. That's 30 points a game. Give me your thoughts on the dynamic right now between Nick Sirianni and Vic Fangio. Is this working? And do you expect to see improvement as Fangio's system gets more familiar to the players?
The system is not much different than the system that they've had. The system that they had under Gannon, under Sean Desai, under Matt Patricia to a lesser degree. The system that they've had is they're going to play off the ball, and they're going to let their 4-man rush get to the quarterback. It's not working. You have the original shutdown corner, Eric Allen, on the show later. He'll tell you. He'll give you firsthand witness testimony.
Right.
You got to play press man coverage. And if you put that blitz, that 46 defense in there, and you blitz like Buddy Ryan did, now you got something. But
Right.
if you don't have either one of those things, you're not going to stop any man. Pat, 30 points a game in the last 11 games is just an insane number of points. You can't, I don't care how good Jalen Herz is, you can't overcome it. You certainly can't overcome it when you're turning over the ball as much as he is.
No.
So about the dynamic between Sirianni and Fangio, I don't think there's any dynamic. I think Fangio coaches the defense, Kellen Moore coaches the offense, and Nick Sirianni is sort of an overseer CEO. I'm not sure exactly what his role is in the X's and O's of the football team. And it begs the question, if he doesn't have the accountability and responsibility, then firing him is really a foolish move.
Yeah. It's not really going to accomplish anything. Right.
How can you blame somebody if he doesn't have responsibility for it?
Yeah. I really wonder, Sal, and you may not have, I guess, an opinion here, whether Sirianni was fully committed to bringing Fangio in for that very reason. Fangio just doesn't strike me as a guy who's going to listen to much input from a head coach. He seems like a real old school guy. And Sal, you were kind enough to send me the transcript of the press conference. And I mean, how Andy Reid-ish does this sound when he was asked about what kind of in-game changes are you making when you see Tampa Bay get off to such a fast start? And you hear, well, you have to make the adjustments that give you a chance to put the guys in position to succeed. That type of cringeworthy answer, Sal. And I bring it up only because is he just covering and just issuing the same banalities that Reid did, or is he that removed from the X's and O's that he doesn't really have an answer?
Pick one. Neither one of them is good. Neither one of those answers is good answer.
Right.
So, but
Yeah.
I gave the two things that I hear around the league are, one, the Eagles really aren't in that bad of a shape if they do a couple of things. One is if they have more game plan specific defense that's specific to the opponent, like a Belichick would run. Belichick was very opponent specific in how he ran a defense. He did not have a scheme.
Right.
He had an idea of how he was going to stop that team. What were you doing to stop that team?
Right.
And two, they've got to really find a way to cut down on Jalen Hurts' turnovers, because they had chances to get back in the game against the Bucs.
Right.
And that's why Hurts talked about playing better after the game in Tampa, because he knew he squandered some of those chances by turning the ball over.
Exactly. A critical strip sack after the Eagles had kind of climbed back into the game. That was the end of the game when he fumbled that ball.
Now you could look at the bright side if you want to. And the bright side must include getting Brown, Smith, and Johnson back.
Yeah.
That's the first part of it.
Right.
Then you look at, all right, they're 2-2 in a division that's up for grabs, in a conference that doesn't really have a dominant team yet.
Right.
Next up are Cleveland, at New York, Cincinnati, and Jacksonville.
Yep.
You gotta go 4-0, Pat, and you got to be 6-2 after those 4 games.
Yeah. Those 4 teams are 3-13 at this point. You have got to sweep those games. At the worst, Sal, 3-1. I mean, Cincinnati might be more formidable, but you got to win the other 3 games.
Yes, and Next Gen Stats, Pat, says they have the 4th easiest schedule remaining in 2024. The Philadelphia Eagles.
Right.
So 3-1 would be good, but you really got to focus and say, all right, we have a chance to go 4-0 in our next 4 games and be 6-2 and take control of the division. Right. Let's go do that. Right. It's all predicated, however, big fat, however, comma, Brown, Smith, and Johnson coming back healthy.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, you were the first to sound the alarm bell on the Jahan Dotson trade, which really, I mean, as you pointed out, he has a whopping 25 yards receiving so far this year. Probably less than the Eagles expected, especially with their top 2 guys out last week. That hasn't worked at all. The Eagles got to get that pass.
He's not open, Pat. I trained my binoculars. When they put him out there, he's never open. And that's another reason why Jaylen was holding the ball. But, Jaylen was also looking for long shots. There were a couple of chances where Levante David was just screaming down his throat right through the A gap. He's got to read and react to that, and he's got to have a hot route for that, and it just didn't exist.
Well, you did mention too, Sal, that who's really scary in the conference. So I mean, the Eagles at 2-2 are still in okay shape here. As you mentioned, they got to make hay the next month. But there's really, do you see anybody in the NFC? I mean, I don't know how much Kool-Aid, the Viking Kool-Aid you're drinking, but I don't really see anybody in the NFC that's anywhere near indestructible.
The Vikings have always been a fluky team. They have always been streaky. But in the end, they don't come up big. Even when Randall Cunningham was the quarterback, or Frank Parkinson was quarterback, go back for the day. I mean, Pat, it's always been the case with the Vikings. They've never won the Super Bowl.
Right.
I'll say this. Offensively, they're very, very good. Sam Darnold is very accurate and has a strong arm, and he has the best receiver in the National Football League, and they have a good running game. They're the only team in the top 5 in points scored and points allowed after 4 weeks.
Yeah.
On defense, they have the 3rd oldest defense in the league that has already played the 5th most snaps on the field. Watch the defense.
Okay.
Even though Brian Flores has a very good scheme, multiple scheme, and he mixes and matches, brings guys on and off the field.
Yeah.
Last week, at the end of the game, they gave up a lot of points to Jordan Love.
There you go. But now, and your point really is wait till November. Watch the Vikings in November, December, and see if that team is gassed. And that's really the risk. It's a long, long season.
Yes, it is.
You've been mentioning forever too, Sal. And let's talk about this. How tight the competition has been. More games have been decided by 8.7 and 6 points than in any other. So, I mean, it's not.
We're going back to 1920, Pat.
Yeah,
1920.
it's not a big difference between winning and losing right now.
It's a one-score league.
Right.
One-score league.
Yeah.
And scoring's at a 14-year low, and passing the ball is at the lowest point this century. And as a result, running the football is at a 36-year high. This is the NFL your father loved, Pat. This is the one right here.
Right.
This is it.
Let's talk about the why of it, though, Sal.
My old man and your old man. This is the NFL we fell in love with.
I know. My theory on it, Sal, because all the rules, let's face it, they're skewed towards the passing game. But, I mean, I think you have a lot of quarterbacks in this league right now that aren't really that good. I mean, you just have – I can point you to a number of teams that have really, really shaky quarterback positions, right? If we went through both conferences – you could see the Colts. You could see the obviously the Panthers with Bryce Young. That was a disaster. Don't tell me Pittsburgh's 3-1 because of Justin Fields. Look at Vegas. There's so many teams that, in my opinion, came into the season with no chance of going deep because their quarterback play is insufficient. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Pat, I mean, the NFL did a deep dive last summer going into the 2023 season. Why scoring is down and passing is down. And, they're not giving away all of their research, but it's pretty obvious. Number one, you had 72 starting quarterbacks 2 years ago, 68 last year. Injuries, that leads to inexperience at quarterbacks who are coming in, second and third string quarterbacks.
Right.
You had 16 different offensive coordinators this year. That's half the league. So you have upheaval in the offensive systems. Jaylen Herz alone, since he's become a starter, has had 5 different guys calling the plays in his helmet. 5.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of upheaval. The dynamics are not steady. There's a lot of injuries. And you heard Mike Greenberg and others, Mel Kiper, talking about the fact that a lot of teams are playing too high safety, and so the ball has to be thrown underneath.
Right.
And so you have yardage down as a result.
Yeah.
Every quarterback who's ever played the position has looked at it and said, okay, they're playing too high safety. I'm handing the ball to my running back.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Look at
it.
Detroit. That Monday night, Detroit put 42 points on the board and threw the ball 19 times. So, I mean, that's a perfect example of what it is you're talking about. Teams are averaging 120 yards a game running the ball, which I think you had told me was a 24-year high. So it's funny to see the running game back because it's been so disparaged over the last half dozen years. Do you think it lasts through the season, Sal?
I do. I think it will. You just have a lot of inexperience at the quarterback position, a lot of upheaval in offensive systems. I do, Pat. I think it's here to stay until, you also have a lot of rookie quarterbacks being shoved into the starting lineups.
I agree wholeheartedly on that point.
This is a long-term trend. And when I mean long-term, I'm talking 5 to 10 year trend.
Yeah. All right. Which underscores really, Sal, that the Eagles, Howie did make a shrewd move bringing in Barkley. He might be the key to the Eagles making any type of deep run this year.
Absolutely. Yes. And they got to use him, though, Pat.
That helps.
And you know what? You got to use him. You're down 14 in the first quarter. You're not down 14 in the fourth quarter.
Right.
First quarter, stay with the run. I don't care how much Levante David is loading up the box. Right. Block him. Yeah. And by the way, employ a fullback.
Yes.
Look at San Francisco. Look at the Chargers. They're using a former defensive tackle from Idaho as a fullback.
The Ravens, as you pointed out.
Yeah, Patrick Ricard. They're using a fullback, even though they have one of the biggest backs in the NFL and Derrick Henry.
I know.
So you have to go with what's available to you right now.
I know.
What do I know, Pat? I'm just on this show with you. I'm not running an NFL team.
All right. Well, look, I'm looking forward to the matchup show this weekend. I want to see that about the Chiefs because I think it's a fascinating. It is. It's a fascinating story. They are completely. They're the only 4-0 team that's so far under the radar. But we'll see. Be interesting to talk about that, Sal, next week. And I appreciate you spending all this time with me. And look forward to talking to you again next week. All right.
All right, Pac. Always great to be on This Week in Pro Football.
All right, Sal. Thanks very much. The great Sal Paolantonio joining me again for an extended stay here on This Week in Pro Football. And when I get back, how about we talk to the one and only Sean Green, and we'll talk some picks and some props and Sean's thoughts on the passing game in the National Football League. We'll do that next on This Week in Pro Football.